folks, I'm Nim Jickles. This is the Ain't That a Bitch podcast, episode 25. That's a quarter. We're a quarter of the way there to something. That's for us to know and for you to find out, I guess. Last week's episode, we had Prajwal and Alice of the Hypotangents podcast visit us and record with us, and I want to extend another thanks to them just here now, because it honestly, recording with them was an absolute pleasure. It was one of the best experiences on Ain't That a Bitch that we've had. I'll be honest, I'm listening to the Hypotangents third episode right now. Our episode, by the way, we recorded with them as well. I thought it was phenomenal. Best episode of the show yet, easily. Right, because it's a pretty average show overall, not gonna lie. It's like, or maybe a little bit below average, but then the episode we're on is like top notch. I don't think they're ever gonna peak it. Just like we're never gonna get any better than episode 5. This show is never gonna go beyond that threshold of quality. But yeah, it still hasn't come out, so you know, Prajwal sleeping on the job, get on that, I guess. But I'm sure it'll be great when it comes out. But the episode that they recorded with us is easily one of my favorite. I would say, if not maybe second to episode 5. Wouldn't you, William? What would you say? What would I say? Would you say that? I think the episode we recorded with Prajwal and Alice is maybe my second favorite. Yeah. Yes. The one where they were on, yes.
That one had echoes.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely the added bit, but I just mean in terms of the quality episode, there was never a dull moment.
We should do more on disc.
We're gonna do more like that, and if anything, like if anyone has the best chance of making a second appearance, it would be Prajwal and Alice, which is obviously a treat that we don't normally allow our guests, but I would make an exception for if anyone, then for them, we might have to get them on again sometime, but not immediately. We are going to try and start getting more guests, because God knows you're all sick and tired of hearing me all the time. That said, let's get back into, the average swing of things. In this week's edition of the Charles is Behind on Current Events podcast, old news now, I know, but I wanted to talk about it mostly because I don't have another topic on hand. Recently, something that I get, that I've said this a million times, that meme culture gets to current events and news events before news stories ever cover them. But this was something that really, I didn't hear anyone talk about outside of the meme world, which makes me think it's one of those things that basically the media is trying to not cover up. It's not a cover up. It's just they're trying to keep it quiet because they don't. It's just the kind of stuff that isn't good. Isn't the kind of news that they want to promote, which is stupid. That's dumb, but that's the way it is. And what it was new, more comprehensive footage of George Floyd. I know, yeah, that guy. Old news, right? But believe it or not, he's still dead, so it really doesn't change just because, the news doesn't give a shit about it anymore and hasn't been talking about it. Doesn't mean that it didn't actually happen. More footage of George Floyd, the process through which he was arrested and then eventually killed by the police. Whatever. I never bothered to learn their names. Doesn't matter to me. More footage was released showing kind of what led up to that, because it was one of those things when the footage first came out. It was very much like, the kind of footage that is used to targeted High School Musical kind of thing of let's just take this clip out of context. I mean, the context didn't matter. I already said this when it first came out, right? The context didn't matter. The guy could have been, George Floyd could have been holding a gun. It doesn't really change the fact that he's dead now, because we don't kill people just for having a gun. In fact, in the U.S., you commend people for owning a gun. It's your favorite kind of person are the ones who own guns, except for the black people, I guess, that explains it. Anyways, that's not the point. The footage that was shown was very bare bones. It was only showing after George Floyd had already been pinned on the ground, and that makes sense, right? Because the idea is that it was what someone else took the video because they witnessed this happening, and so they wouldn't have, thought anything of it until they saw the guy being pinned on the ground and choked to death, saying, "I can't breathe." But I think this was body cam footage, I'm pretty sure, which is kind of the first thing you're supposed to go to with police officers. If that's why they wear them, and lots of times it's the classic instance of, it was lost, and it wasn't, of course. And this is the kind of thing where I don't know if it was who was trying to do more cover-ups, was the police or the news media, because it's one of those things of the police wouldn't have wanted to show the footage because they wouldn't want to show that the officers were using, obviously, excessive violence and aggression and eventually killed the man. But we got that footage from an outside source, right? So then why would we then not get the police sides because let me, spoiler alert, the new footage that got released, it's not actually doing anything better for George Floyd, as much as the news would like you to believe in what they show. So why would the police not then release it? Well, I'm pretty sure actually after we got that third-party footage of George Floyd, the news people were the ones who were like, let's not show the rest of this let's not show both sides of the story, because it's much easier to just, for the news, it's so much easier to just make things one-sided. I mean, partisan news media has been the only kind of news media for decades, and if you believe anything otherwise, like, you're living in a fantasy to think there's such thing as as nonpartisan news media. That it just doesn't exist. News media is biased. That's the purpose, is for it to be biased. It's just a performance at this point. News is as authentic as the WWE is. It really is. There's no soft way of putting it. And I'm not saying don't watch WWE or shut down the WWE. That's actually quick aside. That was a thing. Was that a thing for you people when you were younger, when you were like 4th, 5th, 6th grade? Did you have your classmates talking about the WWE and them being like, "Did you know that the WWE is staged? Like, did you know that's fake? It's all an act." And at the time, I didn't give a shit about wrestling, so I didn't hardly know what they were talking about. I'd heard of the WWE, I heard of the John Cena meme, basically. That's pretty much the extent of my knowledge. So then a few years later, I did a little research into it, and I was like, well, no fucking shit, it's staged. Like, they're characters. It's like reality television. It's not that real. It's, obviously. But I didn't get it because the only, source I had at the time was kids saying that to me. So I didn't care, but in my head I was like, oh, well, I guess that's some kind of, that must be a real scandal, huh? But to me, it was not, I was not aware that it was this thing of, it was only the kids. What I mean is, I was just kind of under the impression that it was a real scandal, because to me, it was like whatever, any sport. And it's like, if, sports, if the NFL turns out was staged, that would be a pretty big deal, right? Again, I wasn't aware. WWE, it's just reality television. Yeah, of course it's staged. But I didn't know that at the time. So, I don't know. I don't know if, is that a thing? Does like every generation of kids have to learn that the WWE is staged because no adults bother to tell them? Or is it just like, or was that a big reveal that only happened once, but only for, the people who didn't know that? Or did adults actually not know that at the time? I don't know. In my mind, I've never thought that, I always assumed the WWE was presented as staged because, again, it just seems so obvious. And I'm pretty sure it was. It was just, we were just stupid kids. But anyways, that was a funny thing for me. It was kind of like, that was like the Santa Claus realization, but if if the mall Santas came up to you and were just like, explained the physical improbability of Santa Claus getting around the earth and entering every kid's home at night. It's like, it disproves itself, but for the kids, it's still like such a, oh my God, earth-shattering reveal. My point is, just so about George Floyd, right? No, but what I was saying was, yeah, it's like that to believe that the news media isn't, not staged, but just it's clearly a form of entertainment. It's like it's just like watching a soap opera, basically, but where real people die, Minor difference. So, the footage finally got released, and all the footage I saw on the news, or, I wasn't watching live network television news, but I went on, I looked it up, because again, I saw the memes. All I saw was the memes and about how angry this made liberals, the new footage. And so I was like, oh, well, so this must be footage that like incriminates George Floyd further or decriminates the police, one or the other, or both. That would make sense. So I went to look it up, George Floyd leaked footage or new footage, whatever. And I found very few results. I found a news article from when this thing first happened, and I'm like, no fucking shit, I seen that already. I need the new shit. I found a couple of news articles with a couple of videos, and basically what they said was they made it seem like it was the opposite of what these memes were saying. The memes were saying this is a bad thing for people who are pro George Floyd, people who defend George Floyd and believe that the cops should be convicted. And all the news stories I saw were like, we got this new footage, and look at how much worse these cops were than we even thought. And it's just stuff about, George Floyd was saying, please don't. So what it was footage of right before the cops were kneeling on him. So it was them. It wasn't them from when they first approached him. The footage starts like they've already approached him and they have their squad car, and it's like, and they're asking him to, get in the car. Oh no, they're taking him out of his car, and they have their car, right? So he's already in the car and they came. And there's other people in the car. So that's the first big thing. There were other people in the car with him, and they all cooperate with the police. The police talked to them, and I guess they're fine. Nothing happened. I don't know how come we didn't get statements from these people, but again, that's one of those things that the news just didn't bother. And when I say didn't bother, I mean intentionally avoided. So it starts from them trying to get him out of his car, and he's like crying. He's on the verge of tears. He's saying, please don't take me. Please don't take. I don't want to get. And basically, he's saying, I'll do whatever you want. Don't hurt me. But he's not actually complying with their instructions. They're telling him to take his hands off the wheel, and he's not. But then eventually he does, and they're telling him to get out of the car, and he's reluctant to. It's just he's terrified, extremely nervous. And like I said, on the verge of tears the whole time. Then they get him out of the car, and they're trying to get him in their squad car, and he's saying he's claustrophobic. He's saying he's afraid. He doesn't want to go in, and then I think that's pretty much where the footage I saw in the news ends. And it's like from there, the rest is history is the idea. And yeah, so he was very clearly upset the entire time. He was very much afraid for his life, and it's worth pointing out that when the cops first show up, the police officer whose perspective we're seeing it from, which I believe is the one who kneels on his neck, is wielding his firearm at the time. So he's holding a gun out at George Floyd during this time. And that's basically, and so he's got a gun. George Floyd is terrified, and he says he's claustrophobic and he doesn't want to get in the car. And basically that's all they show. And the idea being that it's showing, the cops were obviously using excessive violence because there's no reason to draw the firearm on an unarmed guy. And he was terrified out of his mind, was claustrophobic, whatever, had trouble. So he would have trouble breathing. He was already hyperventilating. And then, one thing led to another. Like I said, the rest is history. So when I saw that, I was like, okay, at what point is this bad for liberals? This is, if anything, this only proves their point further, right? This is, you would be more sympathetic towards George Floyd after seeing this, because it's basically showing, everything we already knew, but that they were also pretty much roughing him up even beforehand. And that's nothing new. So I don't understand. So I did more digging. This is from a person, like, this is me. I've never done research into news media, into current events, unless it was literally a school project to look up current events, okay? I'm blatantly ignorant of what happens around me. And I don't feel good about that. I'm not bragging about that. I'm just saying it's something that I don't have the energy or the stamina to invest my time in, because keeping up with current events in, the world is so mentally exhausting to me. So I'm not really ashamed of that either, but I'm not proud of it. I wouldn't say that. So, but I was very curious about this because, well, why? Because there's memes about it. Okay, I wanted to understand the memes. Now you know. If you want me to research something, if you want me to do my homework, that's the driving motivation. Okay, there was memes about this footage. I wanted to understand the memes, and I didn't. So I did more research. I did the homework. So I did some deep digging, and I will openly admit that the best footage that I found, well, you had to combine it, okay? This wasn't the best, but this was the other half of the footage I needed to see was from a Ben Shapiro, I think, podcast. It was like Ben Shapiro's podcast, which, like, I'm pretty sure the tagline of Ben Shapiro is, like, fully, he's embraced, I guess, the meme. I don't know if he knows that people are making fun of him, but, like, his promotion for, his podcast is, facts don't care about your feelings, and the fact is, the Ben Shapiro podcast is the best place for your right-wing news media, whatever. Anyways, so that's honestly, I feel like that's funnier than it should be to me. Anyways, point is, Ben Shapiro saw this footage and he provided his own clip and had his own take on it, and I think for the most part Ben Shapiro is a pretty reasonable person. I think my only issue with him is that he basically takes good ideas, which he does have some good ideas, and then the part where I dislike him is when he pretends to be something that he isn't, and that's something that applies for me to everyone and everything. Anything that pretends to be or believes that it is something that it isn't, or takes itself too seriously, I immediately lose respect for it. So, yeah, Ben Shapiro, when he wants to make himself out to be, like some leading political debater or something, like the champion of right-wing politics, I find that a little bit laughable, because basically what Ben Shapiro does when he owns liberals is he just goes and, admittedly, he does drop facts and logic on a bunch of university students, and he's a grown-ass man doing that, like going and quote-unquote poning, university students, and it's like, well, yeah, but they're like college SJWs, anyone could do that. We've seen literal just like vloggers and random YouTube schmucks, like anyone, just go out with a camera and be like, we talked to a bunch of feminists on a university campus and we made fun of them and we bullied them until they cried, and it's like, good for you, yay. Ben Shapiro is better than that. I'm not saying he isn't, but he sinks himself down to that level for like I said, it's a performance, as much as news is, as much as he, I'm sure, insults CNN, and roasts CNN for what it is. He's no different. At the end of the day, he's just a performer, and that's fine. I mean, that's, again, WWE. It doesn't bother me because I'm so used to these things all being artificial and superficial and fake and staged, and it's not like it's gonna shatter my world or anything. But again, I'm fine with people being what they are. I don't like it when they pretend they are what they aren't. So yeah, I'm fine with what Ben Shapiro is. I just don't. I'm not gonna, stand by and be like, if he says he's something else, I'm not gonna be like, oh yeah, sure. No, you are. We are. He also says that he's, a libertarian, which again, he's absolutely not. He's a religious. He's not Christian conservative because he is a Jew, but he's religious conservative. I mean, he is strong. He believes in he's anti-porn. He's anti-premarital sex. That is not the words of a libertarian in the slightest. I'm pretty sure he's isolationist too, or at least protectionist. So no, he's not libertarian. He doesn't go down on the political compass even a little bit. But whatever. He can be whatever he wants. Anyways, that's besides the point. Point is, Ben Shapiro showed a little bit of footage that overlapped, but a lot of the footage he showed was very actually different than what I saw. And so that was the perspective, and then he provided this perspective that I finally understood. Like, that's why this footage, the joke is the liberals are freaking out now, losing their shit. Because, yeah, the footage basically shows that George Floyd was nuts, he was high as a kite, and out of his mind before they ever were kneeling on his neck. And I know people have been saying that, and you kind of have to take all the data and put it together, right? Piece it together. So people know. They did an autopsy and stuff, so they know he was under the influence of drugs. I think he even said himself that he was... wait, that was someone in the comment section. I'm not going to take that as fact. All that matters, again, the autopsy is all you need. So I think he was on fentanyl. He was high on fentanyl when the police came up to him. That's not... that's not an offense. That's not a chargeable offense because they only found that out after he was dead. So you can't really blame him for that. You can't be like, oh yeah, that's why the police drew their guns. No, that it doesn't work that way. So that doesn't affect. So what I'm saying is, here's the important part of this, right? The takeaway, that doesn't change the morality of the actions of the police officers. And again, I absolutely respect Ben Shapiro in this clip that I watched, because what he says I almost totally agree with. He doesn't say anything that I find egregious, but again, that's basically, he's not saying what he really thinks, which is that I'm sure he thought that the police officers were in the right and were totally in the clear, and weren't overacting. He probably believes that because the person, they shot was on drugs, that was completely morally, just morally passable, right? But he doesn't say that, so I appreciate that he doesn't say that. Basically, what he says is that what the problem with this footage is not the difference that it makes in the actions of the police. It's the difference that it makes in everyone's perception of the situation, because the news did hide this from us. They did, right? Clearly, this footage, it didn't show up out of nowhere. This footage is not like from some guy who filmed it on their phone, like the original footage was, and then like stepped up months later, like some fucking rape victim who suddenly decides, all right, now I think I'm gonna tell the truth. Sure. No, it wasn't that. It was body cam footage of the police officers. I would be very difficult to convince me that they couldn't find this footage all this time when it was such a hot topic issue. It was after things had cooled down. The news was like, pond's settling, let's throw another fucking stone at it. And then I guess by that point their script writers had worked out a way to make it turn, twist the events to seem like George Floyd is again still totally the victim. So here's the deal, right? I've been saying a lot of things. I don't, and I hope I made this clear before, but if not, I don't for a moment condone the actions of those police officers. Even, like I said, even Ben Shapiro at least doesn't openly condone the actions of the police officers. The problem here is with the idea that that this was hidden from the public. And the reason Ben Shapiro has a problem with it is because, of course, he's obviously anti-riots. Again, he claims to be libertarian on the political compass, and yet he's, like, he's the fucking thin blue line, protect the police officers at all costs guy. So, again, no, he's so off. He's so authoritarian. That's irrelevant. Point is, his problem is that he's saying this partial footage that we got was what led to the riots, and that led to people freaking out because what they saw was a completely innocent man who had, not completely innocent. He was charged with a counterfeit $20 bill. Again, I said this way back when. $20 fucking dollars. No one, should be able to even convince themselves that that's punishable by death, unless you're in China, in which case everything's punishable by death, and that's different. So all you saw was a guy who was basically murdered for stealing $20. It's like, wow, okay, it's pretty black and white, right? And it wasn't. The fact of it was, because then you had all those things that people got really into that became their mantras. I can't breathe. I can't breathe was a big one. So someone's kneeling on your neck, you probably can't breathe. That's true. First of all, if you really can't breathe, you probably couldn't say that you couldn't breathe, but you could get it out. Okay, let me restart this. My point is, I'd never had a problem with "I can't breathe" being, one of the big lines at the forefront of the protest, people putting on signs and stuff, because it gets a message across. That's the point. And those were his dying words. Those were his last words, was "I can't breathe." So the actual meaning of them is pretty much irrelevant. He could have said, "Fucking tell my mom I love her." That would be, also very fitting last words, and something that I would put on a sign as well if I was going to go protest police officers. It's a little bit wordy, but my point is, here's this new footage. Here's what it shows us. He was saying "I can't breathe" before they ever got him on the ground. And Ben Shapiro absolutely points this out. And again, I can't say that he's wrong. He's not lying. You can see very clearly in the footage. He says, "I'm claustrophobic. Please don't put me in the squad car, officer." And "I can't breathe." He says all kinds of, "I'm terrified." He does say he would rather be put on the ground than in the squad car. So all that, it does not change the end result. It does not change how guilty the police are. Because, and Ben Shapiro does also point out some things, like the police tried to be very accommodating. They said they would accompany him in the squad car, roll the windows down, try and keep, so that he would calm down enough to go in, because he said he was afraid, he said he was claustrophobic, so to get him to calm down, they said they would accompany him, they would sit in the squad car with him so he would calm down and feel safe and comfortable. But that doesn't change the fact that the police officer did have a gun out, right? Before he had ever done anything aggressive. Yes, he was acting erratic, and to them, it was probably very obvious that he was under the influence of substance abuse. So maybe they thought, and then that comes back to the question of, oh, was it a race? Was it a race thing? Was it you see the black man acting funny, you assume he's on drugs and armed. And, again, people will tell you, but he was on drugs, so obviously it wasn't a race thing. People making this a race thing. Yeah, but he wasn't armed. Was he? Oh, shit. Well, I mean, you fact check that. I'm going to get eaten alive if I'm wrong about that. He definitely didn't pull a gun, though. I know that. No, that was different. He did. I think he was charged with armed robbery or something. That was the whole big story. It's he robbed a pregnant woman at gunpoint or something. I'm not saying that's fine, but I just mean he didn't have a gun at this time. Right? Because that's how it works. It's case by case. And yeah, you could say maybe they knew it was George Floyd, the guy who was known for an armed robbery, and so they assumed he had a gun. But, I mean, I don't know how the police data bank system works inside and out, but I don't legitimately think that a police officer was called. It's this guy, gave me a counterfeit $20 bill, and they're like, he's probably got a gun. So yeah, might have been a race thing. Hate to tell you, that part might have definitely been a race thing, where they just saw a guy who was probably high, turns out he was, and probably had a gun, turns out he didn't. I think, it pretty much counters out. Yeah, they were trying to be nice to him, but that was to get him to comply, right? Without putting up a fight. It was for their own benefit. They didn't want him to, flail about, maybe accidentally get a good hit on one of them, break their nose, knock out a tooth or something. And they also just didn't want to make more trouble for themselves. So they were being, as nice to him as they outwardly appeared to be. That doesn't make them good Samaritans. And before they were nice, so that would be the argument, right? Of people saying, oh yeah, before he was kneeling on his neck, the police officers, look at how nice they were. They were being so accommodating and stuff. And then I would say, before they were doing that, they did have a gun on him, which would make anyone nervous, high or not. So, like I said, I think it's pretty much a net zero game. This new information changes very little. Like I said, it does kind of, it softens the impact of the words "I can't breathe," because, like I said, he was saying he couldn't breathe before they were ever on his neck. But it also doesn't change the fact that, just from some critical observation, you could probably make the inference that if the guy's kneeling on his neck, he cannot breathe. I will say the argument that people make is the police officer would not have been taken him seriously, because he was already saying he couldn't breathe before he was kneeling on his neck. So then when he was kneeling on his neck and he was going, I can't breathe," he would be like, oh yeah, heard this shit before, it doesn't mean anything. Which would be fair, but George Floyd did die, so it doesn't, it's that kind of thing. I look at the footage, I hear what people say that I know are facts, I hear the critical analysis of what actually happens in the footage, And that's all good and well. But there's always the people in the comments, in the whatever. Now, that's the problem, is news has a comment section now. God, imagine back in the day when you would watch the news and you would make your own opinions and maybe talk amongst your family, and then you'd have to go to work or church the next day, and then, or that day, and then you'd see them, and then you could share your opinions. Right now, any news article you read online, you just scroll down to the end of it, and you got immediately someone going, well, this is just another example. Isn't it funny how? And it's all over it's ridiculous. So, anyways, what I was saying about this specifically is people going, this is the problem that I have with conservatives a lot of time, is this is an argument that very often gets caught up with them. I've said before, I have so many problems with liberal arguments as well. And I try my hardest not to make those arguments, not to make those logical fallacies, not to, trip myself up in that way. But there are absolutely, I will not deny at all that there are huge issues with liberal arguments. Lots of them. Not all of them, lots of them. But that overall, I have a bigger problem with conservative argument because, and so that's because of their own, because they of course have their own flaws in their arguments, common flaws, and those overlap lots of times. But this is one that bugs me more from conservatives than it does from liberals. Okay, and it's this thing of, let's take the little stuff. Okay, let's take the little stuff and get facts. It's real facts, real statistics, real data. And then you draw, a conclusion from those facts, which is a reasonable, logical inference. And then you take that inference, you take that conclusion that you've drawn from those real facts, and then you apply it to the big scale, to the whole thing, And it's like, no, you can't. No. It's like they go through this whole process. It's very logical, very reasonable, and then suddenly they blow, and then that's where they lose it, right? It would take an entire episode to then go over and say what the liberal side of maybe that'll be next episode. I'll talk about what my problems are with liberal arguments, but for now I'm talking about conservatives, right? So this is an example. So I have the example right here. It's what I'm already talking about. You see this is the big picture. A police officer, a police officer kneeled on a man's neck until he died. Okay, and while he was kneeling on the neck, the man was saying, I cannot breathe. He didn't let up. The man was unarmed. He was black, because of course that has to be a part of it. And his only crime that he was being convicted of, that he was being charged with at the time, his only crime was giving a counterfeit $20 bill to a clerk. And the other police officers who were with that officer did nothing to stop them. Okay? And now this is what, and I'm not saying this is what everyone does, but this is what the people in the comment section of the original news articles I looked at would say. This is their train of thought, right? They go, okay, well, let's look at this whole footage that we have. Now let's find this part where George Floyd went, I can't breathe. He said this before he was on the ground. He said he was claustrophobic. He said, I can't breathe. And he was saying all these things before they put him in the squad car. Then he even said he would rather be put on the ground than put in the squad car. And at this time, the police officers were complying with his requests. They were being pretty, they were being pretty compliant, agreeable. And then later, but then he was struggling. He was not going in the squad car, and that's where he's got to go. You can't not do that. He did commit a crime. So they're trying to put him in the squad car. He wouldn't go in. So they got him on the ground because he was struggling. He was resisting. And then the officer put his knee on George Floyd's neck, which is not a move. That's not a maneuver that he's meant to be using. So he shouldn't have done it, right? But if it wasn't hurting George Floyd, then I guess it was okay. So how do we know if it was hurting George Floyd or not? Well, if George Floyd said something like it was hurting him, then that might be a reason. But all he said was, I can't breathe. And now we know that he was saying, I can't breathe, before the officer was kneeling on his neck, which means that the officers logically could not have drawn a serious conclusion, taken that expression seriously, and thought he was actually unable to breathe. Ergo, so the conclusion is, George Floyd was speaking nonsense before they were kneeling on his neck. He was speaking nonsense after they were kneeling on his neck. There's no reason for the officer to have taken him seriously and therefore he didn't have a sound reason to believe that what he was doing to George Floyd was wrong. And it's like, yay, I win. I'm a conservative. Give me my fucking medal. Then you have to remember, George Floyd is dead. The police officer is not. That's the difference. That's what matters. All of what they just said is true. All those comments, the comments didn't obviously step by step go through it that slowly, but you read enough of them and you figure out basically where they came from and where they went with it. And yes, all that is true. I am not going to argue that George Floyd was not fucking high out of his mind on, I guess, fentanyl. Probably other things too. And he probably does have a serious history of crime. And that is something that needed to be looked into seriously. And I do agree that because he was basically deranged at the time that they got him on the ground and kneeled on his neck, that you can't take anything he said seriously. That does not, at any point along that process of events, mean that the cops get to just throw, their own critical thinking, their own logic, their own common sense out the window and go, well, this guy's high, so I can't trust anything he's saying. Kneeling on his neck, it might be fine. If the guy had his air cut off to the extent where he died, then it was probably too much violence. Okay? Maybe. No, here's the other argument. This is the counter argument that comes up, right? Is that I think again, autopsy, he died of heart failure or something. He died I think he died of an overdose while the officer was kneeling on his neck. And I think that is true. I think it was one of those things. It was the increased strain on his heart, on his lungs, on his everything, cardiovascular system, due to everything that was going on, that caused him to die, right? And so again, you can make the logical inference that if a fully healthy man had been knelt on, had the exact same treatment as George Floyd, they may not have died. And again, you have to realize that that's completely irrelevant to the situation because George Floyd did die. And the legal system that all the American citizens agree to and accept and go out in their daily lives living by, okay, this is the legal system that George Floyd believed to be living in, is that if you commit, a nonviolent crime, and if you're not holding a gun, you're not threatening police officers or other human beings with death and violence, you're not going to be killed by a police officer. Police officer is the last person he thinks is going to kill him. If you go back to looking at that footage, he was also he was not being aggressive to police officers at all. Like I said, he was babbling like a nonsense, like a lunatic. It's true. But it was all very, very docile. It was all just like, yes, I'll do whatever you say. Then he didn't, which is wrong, but it's not like he was, it's not like he was lying. You can't say like he had malicious intent. You can't say that the police officers could ever at any point have felt threatened, because I certainly wouldn't have if I had been in their position. And I mean me, a guy in a t-shirt and jeans, not them, people with, protective clothing and weapons, guns and batons and tasers. There's no argument to be made. Like, what the hell kind of empathy are you using there to say that if you put yourself in a police officer's shoes and be like, I'd be terrified of that guy who's too high to even think straight? Yeah, he seems like a threat. Yeah, no, racist doesn't play a role. I didn't mean to talk about this for so long. Like I said, this is old news now, but maybe people hadn't heard about it. Also, no one gives a shit or listens to this podcast anymore, so it doesn't make a difference whether people care about these topics or not. But the extension of it, like I said, talking about the footage itself wasn't important because most people would have seen it, but it's possible you only saw one side. If you hadn't seen, like I tried to do, I'm sure I missed some important bits still here and there. But I tried to get both sides of the story, get the complete footage, and if you hadn't been able to do that, then hopefully, I showed you something. Maybe I showed you one side or the other that you weren't aware of. That would be good. But at the end of the day, whatever you got out of this, I hope the takeaway is that the footage that we see, whatever it is, new, old footage, none of that changes the facts of a man being killed for stealing $20. That's what it boils down to, right? You can even complicate it a little bit. You say a man, a black man on drugs being killed for stealing $20. Okay. It doesn't change that much. He was still murdered. Yes, it was assisted by the fact that he was under the influence of he was substance abuse. He was abusing substances. God damn, I can't say that fucking phrase. Anyways, and yes, that may have been what ultimately killed him. But no one has for a moment been like, and by no one I mean like the police force themselves, the police departments, have never for a moment been like, yeah, I mean, kneeling on a guy's neck if he's high, that's one of the things we teach them at police academy. Like that's basic training, We even have a rhyme for it, If he high, he die. And by die, we mean we kneel on their neck. Yeah. It's like, if he high, then on the neck go the thigh. That's the rhyme that they teach the police officers at the police academy. And so, that police officer was he was like, oh, that rhyme, I remember it. And so he saw George Floyd was high, so he put his knee on his neck. That seems perfectly reasonable to me. No one ever fucking said that. No one ever said that just because a healthy man could have survived it, just because there was not, meritable, credible evidence that George Floyd actually was being suffocated by it, just because that evidence didn't exist, no one ever said that was a criteria that would allow for a police officer to kneel on an unarmed man's neck. So, at the end of the day, all those details are irrelevant. This is what I say all the time. Yes, some things should not be oversimplified, and it's absolutely deadly to oversimplify some things. But some things, it's almost as bad if you overcomplicate them. At the end of the day, the only facts that matter are what crime this person committed, what punishment he received, and what legal system it was under. The crime was $20. Even add on the drug abuse. You can add on the fentanyl. So, man in possession and use of illegal drugs and stole $20. The punishment was cruel and unusual. I don't know if cruel and unusual applies there, but it was unusual because they said that's not, a police condoned tactic, and it was cruel because it led to death. So the punishment was death, even if it wasn't a direct. Maybe manslaughter. Let's not say murder. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, because that's the problem, right? People are calling for the people to be charged with, first degree murder, premeditated murder. And I would agree with the naysayers going, no, it's not. I would say, yes, I think all the facts that we've got suggest that it was not first degree murder because it was not premeditated. I do not believe the police officer had the intention to kill George Floyd. I just believe that the police officer was not concerned with whether or not his actions did kill George Floyd. And that's manslaughter. Manslaughter is when you get into a fight with someone. You're not going into the fight saying, I'm going to murder this person, but you are going into the fight saying, I want to win this fight. And I would rather he dies than I do. And if you kill the person, that's manslaughter. So, the crime was stealing $20 and abusing drugs. The punishment was manslaughter. And the legal system was the US of A, where for all their problems, I'm fairly certain that there's no legislature written that if a black high man steals $20, you get to kill them. So there you have it. End of story. He's in a country where it's not legal to do the things that were done to him for the reasons that they were done. The police are in the wrong. George Floyd was not murdered, but he was killed unjustly. He should have received a trial. He should have been treated differently, and he should still be alive today. But he's not. and the police officers should be tried and given the sentences that they deserve. Is it murder? No. Manslaughter. Guess what? Manslaughter is still a crime. People need to remember that. You can't always jump straight to the extreme. Can't always jump straight to the extremity of, a man died, charge the person for murder. No, there's a reason we have first-degree murder. That's because there are other degrees. There are second, third degrees. So use them, use the legal system. We have it in place. This is a problem we have. I am someone who is fine with anarchy. I don't have that stigma around the word. People believe anarchy is synonymous with violence, and I know that that's not true. Peaceful protest can still be anarchic, absolutely. Going on strike is a form of anarchy, Boycotting businesses is a form of anarchy because you're tearing down the system. Gandhi was an anarchist. In his own right, he was, but only until, Britain got the hell out of India. After that, he was no longer an anarchist. He was assassinated, but he would have, because then as in India, he was honestly he was pretty much a nationalist, an Indian nationalist. But anarchy just means countering whatever system it is that you're under. So I'm all for it, because if things don't go the way you want them to, you change them, you counter them, you get upset, and you take action, and you send a message, and then if the government is just, if the government is good, or maybe if they even just want your votes, they will change the way things are going, and then that's way to get what you want. And ideally, what you want is something that will be beneficial for at least a majority of people. If it's not, then hopefully someone's going to come and protest against you. That's fair, right? It's quid pro quo. Where was I going with this? My issue was with people who... what the hell was my issue? Oh, yeah. My issue is that, anarchy should be... This might be self-contradictory. I might be a hypocrite here, so maybe anarchy is not the word I'm looking for. But I'm going to use the word anarchy. No, I'm just going to say civil unrest. No, was it? Is it civil unrest? Is that like the big fancy word for basically a peaceful protest? Civil unrest? Civil unrest? Yeah, I think so. At least Google's got results for it. That's supposed to be your job. It's fine. I already did it. Anyways, let's use the word civil unrest instead. So protests, nonviolent protests and things. I'm a huge fan of that. I think that, like I already explained why I like it. I think it's a good way of getting the system to make the changes that you think are better for the system. That is different than throwing away the systems that we do believe in, that do work. To be fair, the U.S. justice system is not one that we really trust, and it's not one that's really right. However, as I already said, the U.S. justice system does not condone the actions of the cops who ended George Floyd's life. So I don't see why people have such an issue with taking the road that follows what we already know works, which is someone gets killed by accident, you charge them with manslaughter. No one's asking you to redefine murder. George Floyd probably is not asking you to do that. To be honest, George Floyd is entirely possible that if you redefine murder to include manslaughter, first-degree murder to include manslaughter, he'd probably then be convicted of murder. So, this is what I mean. You get yourself caught in a bunch of, self-loops, self-fulfilling prophecies and things, dead ends, and you don't want to do that. And to avoid that, just simplify some things. You make a decision, you draw a conclusion from the information you have, and then you plug it into the system, and you can't always trust that they'll take care of it, but you tell them it's your job to take care of this. And in this case, the job is charge the police officers with manslaughter. Again, it's very simple. You just say that. And then make it happen. I can't tell you how to do that, but yeah, that's step 2. So apparently I've been talking about this for 50 fucking minutes, which I refuse to believe. What the hell? I mean, this is just ending up like the Prodigal and Alice episode. Remember back when I would, finish a topic and I would be like, so that's half the podcast done, right? And then Aiden would be like, no, that was 15 minutes. And I'd be like, holy hell. And then with Prodigal and Alice, I was like, okay, now we can start the podcast. And it's like 40 minutes have gone by. Insanity. I actually had other topics, but I guess I'll do one or two of them. I don't have that much time, which is fine by me. But yeah, no, I'm totally dropping that now. New Mutants is apparently coming out August 28th. So, for those of you who don't know, the New Mutants was basically a cursed project. And I say project because it was an idea Fox had, I think originally for a television series. It's a television series. I think it got a trailer that came out in like 2018. Maybe 19. Long time ago. I heard things about New Mutants, and it was, in the downturn of the X-Men. I think it might have been before Apocalypse, but I think people already knew Apocalypse was coming. And the general idea was like, after Apocalypse, that ends the second trilogy, the prequel trilogy of X-Men movies. So then where do you go? Oh no, maybe it was after Apocalypse, but then like Logan. Was Logan before Apocalypse or after?
Logan is what?
Did it come out before Apocalypse? Not in the timeline.
Yeah, it came out.
So Logan came out. Okay, so I guess it was after Logan, so people had basically seen the end of the X-Men, right? Because Apocalypse is a prequel. Whatever happens in Apocalypse, you know that they end up okay and they last long enough until eventually the events of Logan come to pass, which is all the X-Men die except for Wolverine because he can, keep healing his body, and Charles Xavier because of reasons. I have no idea why Charles Xavier is still alive. But he's in really bad condition. He starts having seizures, and the humans are still being terrible, except now they're not being terrible in Canada anymore. They're being terrible in Mexico because, of course, bad things are only illegal in the U.S. according to the I don't know. Bad experiments can be done everywhere on both ends of the borders of the U.S. And then they create, evil Wolverine, and then he kills Wolverine, but then there's like a little girl, and they form a new thing of mutants, right? That's pretty much how Logan ends. I don't know. I don't think I actually watched the very end of it. I watched it on a plane, which is unfortunate because supposedly it's, the best of the X-Men franchise, but whatever. The point is, that happened, so everyone basically was like, well, that's the end, right? No more. The X-Men are no more. There's a new generation of mutants, I guess. Anyway, so Fox came out with this thing. It was going to be the New Mutants. The New Mutants was not the kids, by the way. It was like, what was her name? X-20? What was her? What was the girl in Logan? Like X-23 or something? X-20 something? X-19? X number 9? X-5? X-15? X-19? I'm just saying numbers. Wait, it was 23? Holy fucking shit. I got it on the first try. That's not that impressive. I watched the movie, dumbass me. Anyways, so it wasn't like X-23 and all the kids she met at the end. That's not the New Mutants. No, the New Mutants is a comic series. That's basically like, hey, you know how the X-Men are constantly fighting, you know how the X-Men are, Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, where they just chill with Charles Xavier and he teaches them things, but then also like they have to fight mutant terrorists all the time because humans hate mutants, but then these mutants hate humans, and it's just about mutants fighting the mutants that are fighting the humans. Well, guess what? Can you imagine a world where mutants have to deal with problems that aren't humans? And I think that's pretty much what New Mutants is. Correct me if I'm wrong. So it's like, yeah, new storyline, because the X-Men storyline has got a start and a finish. It's like they probably knew they were going to do Dark Phoenix, but that's still prequel. So it doesn't matter. Nothing's going to take place after Logan, right? That was pretty much the decision they had come to. So where do we go from here? Sideways, not forward or backwards, sideways. So New Mutants. I guess it would also technically be a prequel to Logan. It would, I guess, take place. I assume it's in the same universe. Or was. Sorry, this is me talking about when the New Mutants was first announced. Anyways, it was this plan they had for a new, I think, TV series. And it was going to be about mutants, just other kids with powers, and they were going to try and figure out how to use those powers. Pretty simple, right? Didn't happen. Something happened, got delayed, was bad. I don't know the full story. I just know it got fucked up so that it never came out, or it didn't come out, and it got delayed pushed back and back and back until Disney did the merger with Fox. Well, now you can't do it, right? So it gets pushed back and back and back more and more and more. So now, they had to sort out the whole kerfuffle with Disney, with Fox transferring all its properties to Disney, right? Or sharing all its properties with Disney, I guess. So, yeah, Disney's got its own schedule. They're making the Marvel movies. They don't have time for New Mutants. It gets pushed back and back and back. Now, finally, at last, they're trying again. I'm not gonna say it's gonna happen because other people don't even know. It's still kind of up in the air. But you'll notice that I said earlier it's supposedly slated to come out August 28th. August 28th, and a trailer for it just dropped. That's nuts. That's crazy. You realize that, right? Like I said, a trailer came out for it years ago. And I remember seeing that and nothing ever came of it. And I just assumed that it happened without me noticing. Then I saw another trailer came and I, looked into it. And it turns out, it never did happen. And now they're trying again, but under Disney. I'm pretty sure the plot, a lot of the story, it's the same basic idea because it is still based off the same comic story. But yeah, a lot of things got mixed and matched around. I don't have any idea if the casting was changed. I don't know if the casting was even decided. Who knows? Point is, they're trying it again, and it's supposedly going to come out in a couple weeks. All right? Not even, less than 2 weeks. Right? That's pretty nuts. I assume, God only knows. And it's coming out in theaters, by the way. So this is a strange thing for a few reasons, right? If you give a shit, which no one does. But for those of you that care, this is kind of crazy because, first of all, like I said, it's coming out so close to the release of its newest trailer, which is, you might say oh, well, that makes sense because the last trailer will come out closer to the release date. But again, it's because it was in such an uncomfortable place for so long. This is only talking about business, right? The business end of it, the corporation side, because it was tossed, like a hacky sack between Disney and Fox. God knows what happened, right? It would be a miracle if it somehow ended up getting a better treatment than Suicide Squad did, right? Suicide Squad never had to change studios, and they still managed to rewrite the script 6 times and, change writers, directors, whatever. And that's why it ended up being a piece of shit, right? So obviously you can understand why people would be concerned, why people there would be hesitant or anxious to see what the end result is going to be, and maybe, not as excited as they were when they first heard about the project, because the idea is, surely something happened. They had to change the casting, they had to change the director, the writer, and it's likely that did happen. And yet they're releasing it as if the production has been following the same schedule as it always has. Again, very close to the things that made Suicide Squad have a lot of issues. So, yeah. I would not be surprised if there is I'm sure there's a very good reason for the concern over it. And it's entirely possible that it's going to be a real mess, or at least have a risk of being a real mess, right? That being said, it's not my place to say. I don't know. No one knows, because no one knows what's going on. But we add on to that, right? So that was the corporate issues with it. Obviously, it's an even weirder situation because now because of course it got, I'm sure, added delay from coronavirus, right? So production of most production of movies came to a grinding to a halt because of coronavirus. It's very difficult to film movies with other people, be traveling around to different sets and all those sorts of things, working with different actors when you're supposed to be quarantined. So most movies are not getting worked on. So if that's the case, if they haven't been working on New Mutants all this time, how is it getting made? How is it coming out August 28th? It doesn't make any sense. How is that possible? And so these are the questions that people are having to ask, right? And again, with good reason. And I don't have the answers, not even close. But so it's just something that I was not looking into this like some people were from the beginning, but I'm just recently now becoming invested in it. So it is a very weird situation. It's just odd and awkward, and I have a lot of questions, and I understand why other people do. Like I said, how did this movie get made? I don't understand. How did this movie get made, and how is it going to get released in a time frame where that would imply, like, this doesn't seem to follow, the timeline that all the rest of us have been living in, which is movies stop getting made after, like, April, and any new movies that were ready to release came out digitally. And this movie is going, not only, did we overcome the massive delays due to the changing of hands, right? The baton pass from Fox to Disney. Not only did we work through that, we also somehow managed to continue shooting or finish shooting before quarantine happened. And now we're going to release it in theaters on August 28th. So no clue how they pulled off the corporate acrobatics to make that work, or if they even did at all, and it's not just going to be nothingness when you go to the theaters. All I'm going to say is, it's been a long time since I have been to the theater, and I intend to watch this movie. I think it should be interesting. As for the actual content of it, it's, like I said, it's a bunch of new young teenagers discovering they have mutant powers. One of them basically creates at least one of the villains of the story. Not the main villain, Shadow Bear. Basically, there's a girl called Mirage. She can make, like, ideas into reality kind of deal. And so she creates, like, this demon bear into a real demon. And then they meet more people. They get put, it's like they get put in a psychiatric hospital or they get put in a hospital for specifically, I think, mutants, newly discovered mutants. There's a female doctor who kind of probably hates them and thinks that mutants are dangerous and probably wants to eradicate them. And they have to work together to escape and then also fight monsters. It's basically the plot of Glass, I think. But with mutants. But I mean, when it comes to something like this, I just boil it down to its components, which is we get some mutants. Well, okay, here's what it is. We have people with mutant powers, new mutant powers, so we get to see some new mutants, right? Because we've been seeing the X-Men for years now. Don't get me wrong. I love Wolverine, but you can only be impressed by the claws, the effects of the claws coming out of his hands so many times. It's new mutants with new powers, new storylines, new enemies, and it's introducing mutants into Disney's Marvel. That's pretty cool, right? That's, of course, the big thing, the biggest question. And, of course, that just makes this whole thing even more weird. So, not only to go back and rehash this yet again, not only did they manage to finish writing, directing, filming this movie in coronavirus with the changing of ownership from Fox to Disney and to release it in theaters, the last question there is, in all that, did they manage to somehow find a way to satisfyingly tie X-Men into the Marvel Cinematic Universe? And of course, that's a question I want the answer to. I'm sure most of the people listening to this do not care to hear the answer to that question. But I do, and I'm going to talk about it because if you know me, you have already gotten the warning that is what this show is going to talk about whenever given the opportunity. So I will. And yeah, that is the question. How is the New Mutants going to tie these mutants into Marvel Cinematic Universe? And I think what people are saying, I'm definitely not the first or only person to say this, but what it's looking like to me is, very logically, we're going to create a world where the X-Men, are in a parallel universe, or, whatever, alternate universe from the MCU. And the MCU, with the help of Scarlet Witch, right, her new show WandaVision, is exploring the multiverse. Doctor Strange was going to explore the multiverse, but I think it might just kind of be because it's called Multiverse of Madness. But it's the Doctor Strange multiverse, He does deal with multiple universes, but those are the universes. He deals with the shitty universes, okay? Or dimensions, I guess is what they said, right? He deals with, dark dimension, mirror dimension. Nightmare is going to come around. So, Multiverse of Madness, I wouldn't expect too much. like I'm sure there will be Easter eggs. There's always Easter eggs, and Doctor Strange is one of the best places to stick those in. There's probably going to be, a montage sequence, not really a montage, but like a flashby sequence where he's like zooming through universes or something. And then there will be like a single frame of an X-Men movie in there somewhere or something like that. A single frame of a Raimi Spider-Man movie. That's going to be cool. But I think what most people are turning to, and what I agree with, is WandaVision to give us the official tie-in, which now I'm saying it out loud, I can see the weirdness of that because, going to the show instead of the movie to tie things in, but also what a Disney Plus move that would be, right? Forcing people to get Disney Plus and watch the show as opposed to watching Doctor Strange in theaters if they want the full story. I mean, it's a little bit like what they did with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and I didn't have a problem with that. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. helped tie in the process through which Hydra got Loki's scepter after the Battle of New York in Avengers 1, right? Ever feel like there's a disconnect there? Like, Avengers 1 happened, the heroes won, they got Loki's scepter, the Tesseract went to Asgard, the scepter stayed with the Avengers, okay? What does that mean? Did Nick Fury get it? Did S.H.I.E.L.D. get it? Well, yes. Captain America 2 happens, you find out that S.H.I.E.L.D. is actually Hydra. Avengers 2 happens, and you find out that Hydra has the scepter. The remains of Hydra have the scepter, and then yada, yada, yada. That's how Ultron gets created. The scepter is another huge, because it's the Mind Stone that eventually goes in Vision. Scepter is another huge plot-relevant object in both of the first Avengers movies. Then Avengers Endgame happens, and they go back, and you kind of get to see what happens. You see, Sitwell, the agent that we find out and Brock Rumlow, two S.H.I.E.L.D. agents that we find out in Winter Soldier are secretly working for Hydra. You get to see them, and of course the secretary, who is the leader of New Hydra, right? You get to see all of them are the people who were put in charge of dealing with the scepter, right? So that if you actually didn't watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., didn't understand it all, you would go into Endgame and be like, end of the huge finale of the MCU. Finally, we get the reveal. That's how Hydra got the scepter, right? No, it was in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. They explained that, which makes sense because that was S.H.I.E.L.D. What a stupid way to put that. Anyways, but that was exploring S.H.I.E.L.D., and so, whatever, season 2, I guess, of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. would have been dealing with S.H.I.E.L.D. post-Hydra, I think. Something like that. I say that. I never watched Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., as you can tell by my ignorance. So how did I find out that it was Hydra that took the scepter from Avengers Tower or Stark Tower and not S.H.I.E.L.D.? Well, the most reliable source of these sorts of information, right? The Avengers, the Lego Marvel Avengers Xbox game. Yeah? So in a cutscene. And I'm not kidding. This is how I got that information. I played the Lego Marvel Avengers Xbox video game, and in a cutscene after you finish, the Avengers 1 storyline, there's a scene where two S.H.I.E.L.D. agents carry away Loki's scepter in a box marked with the S.H.I.E.L.D. logo, and as they're walking by, the S.H.I.E.L.D. logo falls away and leaves behind a Hydra logo instead. I shit you not. And I was like, that's a nice lore drop. It's like an early equivalent of putting the Emperor's announcement to the universe in Fortnite, same idea. So that's how I knew that. Point is, I feel like this is a very similar move. That was a weird tangent. I feel like this is a similar move though, of taking WandaVision and using that as a vessel, forcing people to watch WandaVision if they want to understand how exactly we get the mutants of that one universe into the MCU universe. Or you don't watch WandaVision, you just watch the movies, and then you watch, I don't know, New Mutants 2 or whatever, and suddenly there's mutants, or you watch whatever other Marvel movie comes out, and then it's like, oh, there's mutants now. Okay, I'll accept that, and you just don't bother with the explanation, which is fine as well, and then it'll become common knowledge at some point. But that is, I'm guessing, how they encourage you to watch WandaVision, but you don't have to, but for the people who give a shit, they will. So that'll give them the information. Even if they're like, I only watch the movies, not gonna watch the show, but then they find out, oh, it explains the mutants. Well, now I have to watch it. It's business decision. Makes sense. So from a narrative point of view and from a business point of view, WandaVision is probably going to explore multiverses and whatever happens, because, it looks to me from the little clips they're showing, Wanda's not entirely 100% on how to work that whole multiverse thing, as it were. So she's probably going to have a few oopsies and accidents, and maybe that accident is going to involve pulling some mutants out into the world. Now, why is it the New Mutants? X-Men are done. I think that makes a lot of sense. It's, again, a business thing of there's no other way to do it because they've ended that storyline and they're all dead. But also then it makes sense story-wise, because narrative-wise, because, you don't have to get new actors, because, God, how would you get any actors better than Hugh Jackman for Wolverine? Couldn't imagine anyone else in that role. Xavier and Magneto, even though they each had 2 actors, could not still imagine anyone in those roles other than those 2 people. James McAvoy and God fucking damn it, I love this guy and I can't remember his name.
This happened last time.
Fuck. What?
Last time you were also trying to remember Charles Xavier actor.
No, Charlie Xavier, I remember. James McAvoy. I'm talking about the young ones. Now I can't remember goddamn... Michael Fassbender, sorry.
How did you forget that?
If I hadn't... I just addressed that. James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender as young Magneto and Charles Xavier. I'll love them almost more than the old ones. Okay. Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart as the original trilogy X-Men, Magneto and Xavier, perfect for their roles, absolutely. The only thing, they are really good for it, but James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender, it's almost unheard of for second casting, like to recast a character and for it to be as good, if not better. But so, casting-wise, X-Men has definitely not had the perfect writing and perfect stories. It's not known for that. But casting-wise, they nailed casting. I don't know how, but they did. So replacing them would be, in my eyes, as difficult as replacing Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. Who could you get other than those 2 people? Everyone else, whatever, I could see it. Beast and Scott Summers and Storm and Bobby and Jean Grey and all the others. They're good, but I could see them being replaced. But those 3, the central characters of the storylines, it would be impossible. And then getting the same actors back would also be weird, because then it would be implying that this is the same timeline. Again, they're all dead. You could do split timeline shit, but they kind of already did that in Endgame, and that's kind of one of those once per franchise situations. If it's not a time travel story like Back to the Future is, if it's a story about anything other than time travel, but you do time travel, you really only get to do it once. After that, it just immediately becomes broken. It's very difficult to pull off a second time, because first time you can suspend your disbelief, give them benefit of the doubt, just allow for, the weird things that happen because it's time travel. Second time, it's kind of like, fool me once, fool me twice, just stop doing time travel. So they probably aren't going to do split timelines, and again, it'd be impossible to replace the actors. So yeah, I think that makes sense as a decision to make. Let the story end with Dark Phoenix as the last movie, as underwhelming as that is, but chronologically for the in-universe timeline, Logan, last movie, much more fitting of an end. Honestly, should have just waited and released that last. You get a satisfying conclusion, you get hope, but also kind of the overall message is humans suck. They killed everyone who was not like them. Who would have thought? Read the comics. And now we have a new generation of mutants, and whether they exist solely in the MCU or if they exist right now in Fox's universe and then are going to cross over, that remains to be seen. But other than that, I think that's a pretty solid idea for where they're going to go, right? They may change everything up. They may completely turn it around on us and do something completely unexpected. But as far as I'm concerned, right about now, almost nothing could be that unexpected. Ain't that a bitch?